Heidi, Heidi, ho there, everybody. It's Hans of the Southern Isles, and I'm here to talk everything Disney. And today is a pretty interesting topic, if you ask me, and I'm going to explain to you why I think Tarzan is the worst movie of the Disney Renaissance period. It's just not good. Okay, so Tarzan is a full length animated feature film that came out in 1999, and it brings up the rear end of the Disney Renaissance period. And if you're not familiar with what lots of Disney fans call the Renaissance period, it's basically the period between 1989 and 1999 when Disney sort of started making good films again. For about 2 decades before that, there weren't too many memorable hits. And quite frankly, the company was thinking about even getting rid of the feature animation division altogether. The Little Mermaid coming out in 1989 and being a super smash hit, Disney kind of kept that formula going, and for the next 10 years produced musicals based upon stories that we kind of already knew, or they reworked them a little bit, and it culminates with Tarzan in 1999. And there's if you watch all the movies in chronological order, you can see that the first maybe 4 or 5 that are considered, those are the big Disney hits: Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King. Sorry, The Lion King. If you take those movies, the backgrounds, the art style, it's still very cartoony, right? It's very much what you might see on Saturday morning cartoons and the like. Afterwards, so Pocahontas to Mulan, you see the Disney artists kind of get a little bit more creative in their direction as far as how they draw certain things, where they're getting their inspiration from. I mean, Pocahontas is probably one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen in my life. The backgrounds alone are to die for, and even in Hercules, you see a lot of these like geometric shapes that in a different film might have been more stylized and kind of taken out, but you see those geometric shapes. You see like a Fibonacci circle in his chin and things like and he's very symmetrical, which also harkens back to like Greek art and things like that. And even in Mulan, the snow clouds, the smoke clouds from the cannon, they're very stylized to have a very like Asian, Chinese style. Like and of course the opening with the watercolors and stuff like that. I mean, it's really beautiful. And then you get to Tarzan, which I will give them credit, is a very lush environment, but it's very matted. If you really stare at the backgrounds long enough, it's very matted. It isn't as three-dimensional as maybe you could want it. And they honestly just used the same trick, which I'll admit probably at the time was this great feat of computer animation mixed with hand-drawn animation, when he's all that tree sliding and swinging and all that stuff. Like, that's great, but they used it so much. They have that whole scene with Son of Man playing in the background, and then you have like a very similar scene with Jane, and it feels very lazy with what they did. They had this one cool thing, and they just had to put it, a little bit here, there, everywhere, and it just kind of, to me, it loses sight of telling a story. Which brings me to my second point. At the time Tarzan came out, Disney had already produced two Tarzan-esque movies 2 years previous. So in 1997, Disney comes out with two separate movies. George of the Jungle, starring Brendan Fraser, or as I like to call it, Encino Man 2, Jungle Boogaloo, and Jungle 2 Jungle, starring Tim Allen. Now, that's all and well, but there was nothing new. There was nothing exciting. It was the same kind of Tarzan story that I had seen on television and in movies previous. And what separated this from George of the Jungle, besides George of the Jungle being more comedic, but George of the Jungle is a complete and total ripoff of Tarzan. And then Jungle to Jungle with Mimi Siku and him living in the Amazon and then coming to New York City. It's like all of them had these very similar storylines, similar arcs of basically somebody who's lived in the jungle for a huge portion of their life and is trying to, figure out who they are and also this modern society around them. The Tarzan movie that came out in 1999 did nothing but kind of reiterate that. I don't get why you make the movie other than cash grab. And my third reason why I have a really big problem with this movie is going back to the storyline is not very good. And then it's basically just a vehicle for a Phil Collins album. Granted, the songs are really good. I love Two Worlds. I love Son of Man. You'll Be in My Heart, although it's cheesy and kitschy, and I was completely nauseated at the time from it. It's not a bad song. I would say the weakest song on that whole album, the soundtrack, is Trashing the Camp, because it really is just two riffs repeated for 5 minutes. And it's catchy, but I can only listen to it for 5 seconds and then I have to turn it off. And though the songs are good, if I'm going to listen to a Phil Collins album, I'm going to listen to No Jacket Required. I'm not going to listen, okay? I'm not going to listen to, I might pull out the soundtrack, but I'm not going to watch an hour plus movie to listen to 4 or 5 Phil Collins songs. They did nothing but use songs from the soundtrack in the movie. You always have a pop singer sing the radio version, but then you have a Broadway style singer sing it in the movie. Usually the lyrics are different in the pop version, the radio version, and yet this movie was basically just a way for Phil Collins to have an album, I guess. And I think at first I was probably really into the fact that I heard Phil Collins was gonna do the music, because go back, a few years, and with the release of Lion King, one of the big draws was that Elton John worked with the music. And yeah, he probably helped compose some of the music. You still had, the Alan Menkins and the Tim Rices of the Disney composer world working on the music as well. And this really wasn't it. This was basically a Phil Collins vehicle, and it shows, where it's not super imaginative. Obviously he probably had help with the orchestral stuff, but even the orchestral stuff is very thin and not as lush as somebody who is a trained orchestral composer would do. And you can't just have a pop star. And I understand his resume is very impressive and whatnot, but he writes pop music at the end of the day. He doesn't really write music for us. He's not telling stories with the music. He's telling stories with his words, that kind of stuff. Yes, he creates great music, but was he the right choice? Probably not. Elton John helped write Circle of Life, right? But in the movie, you don't hear Elton John's version of Circle of Life. You know, in the movie, you don't hear Elton John's version of Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Like, you don't hear, that's not it. You have, like, a version for the movie. And I think, for me, I was really turned off by the fact that these were the same exact songs that I was hearing on the radio. These were the exact same songs I was hearing on the radio. And like I said, even the orchestral parts were, and this is like the music teacher person coming out of me, but it's very minimal. I think that's what kind of turns me off. I think you really have to take into consideration that the Disney Renaissance ends with Tarzan. I get that after Tarzan, the studio was a lot more experimental with the stories they were telling, things like that. And there's a lot of underrated movies that have come out in, I think, what's called the post-Renaissance era. There's a lot of awesome movies that I love, like Lilo and Stitch and Emperor's New Groove. But they were not in that, they didn't use that formula that the movies in the 90s did. And so they kind of aren't a part of it. And Tarzan was sort of that last movie that, you know, followed that formula. And I think that's the only reason why the Disney Renaissance ends with them. I'm going to give credit where it's due. People went and watched this movie. You know, I had sort of been in a funk with Disney movies. I really didn't care for Hunchback or Hercules, I think, which is kind of funny because those are probably movies that were aimed towards my demographic. And then Mulan came, and Mulan really like invigorated me again. I was like, thank you. Finally a movie that's like super relatable, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how it was relatable to me, but I really enjoyed it. For some reason, Mulan really got me into movies again, and I was super excited about Tarzan. We were oversaturated with, you know, what I like to call Jungle Man fever. We were oversaturated with it. And, you know, and just given the fact that 2 years previous, Disney came out with 2 movies with very similar Jungle Man premises. And to sort of then be like, well, this is different. It's different, right? And to me, it wasn't any different, and the songs didn't blow me away. Like, honestly, to me, it ends with Mulan. Like, to me, in my head, it always has ended with Mulan, and Tarzan was this anomaly cash grab. It was trash too, but this anomaly of a an anomaly. Tarzan was an anomaly of a cash grab. And I'm sure there's tons of people who love Tarzan. I'm just not one of them. And I gave you my reasons why, which is why I'm saying don't at me. If you love it, continue to love it, because Lord knows it needs people to love it and to cherish it. And there's movies that I love that I'm sure everybody out in, all of you guys think is trash, and you know, but I love it, right? And so I think, you know, and if you gave me reasons why you think what I like is trash, I'm definitely gonna listen to it. I might not agree with it, but I'm definitely gonna listen to it. So until next time. Was I supposed to say something?